Ni hao. Wu jiao, Stephanie. I don't know why I'm saying it like that. I feel like talking in this voice. What? Okay, hi. Hi guys. How's it going? I'm excited because I got an email asking for my help in planning how to study Chinese, how to study HSK from a beginner level. And I love this kind of stuff. I love it, I love it, I love it. I love it because it's so messy, and I wouldn't have said that a year and a half ago, but I'm saying it now. Why is it messy? Because people are so different. People are so different, and what works for one person might not work for another. So every bit of advice I'm going to give this lovely woman is to be taken with a grain of salt. And Sahana, I'm talking to you. All right, so I got this email from Sahana. She's living in Shanghai. She's not from Shanghai. And she said she was a homemaker. So I think there's children involved in the scenario, but I'm not quite sure. So either way, she's kind of time pressed. She mentioned that the classes that she was seeing were too much of a financial commitment, and so she's looking for online resources to start at the beginner level for HSK. No problem. Here we go. I've made a quick list. I've got some props. I'm ready. I'm so ready. Again, this is very malleable. If you are starting to study the HSK, some of this may work for you, some of it may not. The biggest thing that I found, and the biggest advice I want to give Sahana, is to keep track of what you're trying, and ask yourself at the end of every session, did that motivate me? If that motivates you to learn more, as far as I'm concerned, that means it's working, and keep using that method. Keep using that resource until it doesn't. If there's something that everybody recommends and it doesn't work for you and you start putting off your study time, stop using it. That's the biggest tip I can give. Now, to actually get to some resources, let me read you what she said. So her initial email was that we had apparently talked a few months ago, and she had asked me some questions, and now she was ready to start studying. And so I asked her a few questions. I said, hey, if you can answer these questions, I can give you more of a tailored idea of what to do. So here's what I asked. Have you studied Chinese or Japanese before? Her answer was no. What languages do you speak? She said English. What are your goals with learning Chinese? She said, I want to speak fluently, write, read, and would like to find a job in Shanghai. The next question, how much time per week or per day would you like to spend on studying? She said 2 to 3 hours a day. I know how to study 2 hours a day. What kind of budget do you have for this? And she said she's a homemaker currently, so doesn't want to spend a lot. She said people here charge 80 RMB, which is a little over $10 per HSK lesson, and I find it expensive. Wow. Okay, with some of the resources I'm going to give Sahana, Sahana, what I'm going to give you is much cheaper than that. So don't worry, it falls into that category. And I basically asked, do you want like in-person stuff, or do you want like self-access materials that you can use online? And she said she wants the self stuff and the flashcard stuff. So here we go. And that's that. I think I asked clarification on one more thing. Oh, I asked her where she was, and she said she was in Shanghai, but she already said that, so that was a redundant question. Sorry. Sometimes I read very quickly. So those are her questions. So Sahana, here you go. I've made some notes on some things, and again, keep that motivation thing in mind, because once that goes, your whole study system could tumble down. So no matter what you try out, please, please, please keep that in mind. What motivates you are the things you should keep doing to keep going. So the main things I made, and this is based on my experience, some of it's based on what people have told me as well, and some of it's a combination of the two, because some of it I took on myself. Before you start touching the HSK materials, I really think it's useful to learn about the language. I got caught up in it, and I started looking at books with the historical orthography on the writing system and all kinds of stuff. Don't do that. Unless you really want to, but in general, if your goal is to become functional in language, don't do that. That's a really fun route to take, and I might come back to it once I get functional, but right now, it's a slippery slope. So here's the recommendation that I think you should do for maybe a month, maximum 2, but probably just a month, to become familiar with the language. There's a gigantic difference between the writing system and the sound system and all kinds of things between English and Simplified Mandarin Chinese. A gigantic chasm. If you look at ratings of the difficulties of language when you come from English, Chinese is either, depending on the system that you're looking at, the hardest or one of the hardest. There's a really big difference in almost every way, except for word order in very basic non-question sentences. All right, so what I think you should do in that initial period, let's call it a month, is there's a few different things depending on where your focus is in those skills. Sahana, in the skills, when I asked you what you wanted to focus on, you basically said everything, which makes it really hard to narrow this down. So I'm going to give you resources in different areas. Try out what you want. In general, Kyle's Sensible Chinese course was one of the most useful things I found. He does not know I'm doing this. He's actually not in that picture. Where did he go? Download now. No. Okay, he was in the picture when I first downloaded it. Oh, here he is. He's behind. Do you see his shirt? Yeah. The website's not... Hey, there it is. There's Kyle. His Sensible Chinese course is really good. It gives you... It's one of those courses that has like those micro videos of 5 minutes in length, and then there's an exercise 5 minutes in length, and then there's an exercise. The exercise is more about the language than with the language, but he also has some speaking practice with like a free audio program that you can use, so forth and so on. He also introduces you to Scritter, which works for some people in practicing the writing. I found a different program that I really like to use for writing practice. But I think it's a really good overview of the language, how to view the language, the components of the language, including the radicals, but not limited to the radicals. So I think spending a month on Kyle's intro course, let's see, character course, because he has a lot of different stuff on there now, so I want to make sure to send you to the one that I actually took. I'm going to need to put that down in the show notes. Again, it's a really, really good introductory course. He has other courses, so by all means, root around and see what's good for you. But I think the one that I took was, one, very inexpensive. I don't even remember how cheap it was. That's how inexpensive it was. It was, two, it was self-paced with videos that had audio as well as a visual component and tasks to do afterwards. So I think getting a basic idea of the language before diving into HSK is a really, really good idea. Another thing, if you want to work in Shanghai, you will be using the language in the oral form quite often. So you might want to start with Fluent Forever, Gabe Weiner. He's coming up with an app. And again, none of these people sponsor. I don't have sponsors on this channel. I just find stuff that works and talk about that. So Gabe Weiner on his Fluent Forever website has audio packs. And those are sounds of the language in their small like micro form, and you can practice the sounds before you get to things that we call words. So they're practicing the common sounds of the language until you can hear the differences between things that sound similar. I should probably go back and do this for the S and the X, or the SH and the X, because I still confuse those. I'm talking in pinyin letters and yeah, the sounds. Anyway, so I think if you're going to be using the language in spoken form quite a bit, which it sounds like your end goal is there, I would start with the foundation of the sounds of the language as well. I don't remember how much the audio packs are. I actually didn't use them. But I have a few friends that have used them and for different languages, and they loved them. They felt like doing that at the beginning really set them up for success in pronouncing the things as they were learning the language as they went. So again, it's on his Fluent Forever website. The audio packs, I believe is what they're called. It'll probably be integrated into the new app that they're making, but I don't even think the beta version of the new Fluent Forever app is out yet. So I would stick to the old resources for now. So there's that. If there's any other resource that you come across, if you go to like Fuzhou Lu, which is like the street that has all of the foreign language bookstores, lots of bookstores in general in Shanghai, and you go into the bookstores and you find a book on radicals that really fascinates you and helps you get used to the look and the feel and the writing order of them and those kinds of things. If you find something like that that works for you, that gives you the overview of the language, then go with that. These are all ideas of things that you can do to get an idea of the language before you dive into the language. Because the HSK materials, even the easiest ones, which are the standard course ones, that a lot of people referred to me to, and I'm really glad they did. These standard course materials you can find, again, on you can find it on Taobao, you can find it on Baopals, and you can find it in those bookstores on Fuzhou Lu. Even these materials, which are the most user-friendly, still just go whew, at the beginning. You dive in and you study the language. It has, as I can show you here in a second, these are my messy exercise books that I can show you, but it has for the first two HSK levels the pinyin and the Hanzi. But still, it doesn't really give you an overview of things that you would miss coming from a script like English. So it doesn't really ease you into the language in any way, shape, or form. I don't think. And I spent months and months and months playing with different aspects of the language before diving into the HSK stuff, and I still felt like it was like, wait a minute, didn't we miss a step? So I really think spending that month learning about the language is a really good way to go. Then when you get to the HSK books that I just mentioned, on Baopals, I think they're about 30, most of them are about 35 kuai each, which for folks outside of China is, what is that, $5-6? So they're really, 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 really affordable. And they come with the audio and the answers you can find online on the publisher's website until you hit HSK 3. But that's another issue. So basically what they have is, I've torn mine up to shreds because I carry around the chapters with me, but there is a study book which has the colored pages, and that's where you get the vocab for that particular lesson. And then they do the grammar points. You can see I've written all over. This is just an example from HSK2. You see the grammar points. And then they have all the listening exercises, all of the writing. They don't have a lot of writing exercises, but they do have some. They go into a little bit of the historic stuff, and you get a little bit of writing practice somewhere. Where's the writing practice? Oh, group work. Yeah, I usually skip the group work because I'm working alone. So what I like to do with the HSK materials, sorry, it's too hot in here. What I like to do with the HSK materials is, honestly, for me, I find the meatiest stuff in the listening. So I actually get the transcripts from the publisher's website, I print it up, and I carry it around with me with the chapter I'm working on. And I will listen to that over and over and over and over again. By the time, now I'm in HSK 3, and at this point I spend a lot of time on the listening before I even do the exercises that go with it. Like, this is the first round of exercises for HSK 2. Now in my studying, I'll spend like 2 or 3 times listening to it over the course of a few days, and then I'll do the exercise. So that's how much I'm looking at the vocabulary. I'm looking at the grammar in, like, I'll make a quick note of the grammar in the chapter. Like this particular, what is this, HSK 2, chapter 3, they highlight 1, 2, 3 grammar points. No, they basically highlight 2. They highlight 2. They highlight, oh, 3. Da, like woda, like mine, or my, me, that kind of thing. Yisha, and Genda, one of the first words I learned. Anyway, and so they're highlighting those 3. So I'll listen for meaning, I'll listen for sounds, and then I'll listen for those grammar points. I'll make notes all over the transcripts, those kinds of things. And then probably the 3rd or 4th time, I'll come back and I'll finally do the exercise. It's totally up to you. I found that doing that and going backwards and doing the workbook first, looking at the grammar a little bit in the course book, but doing the workbook first, I found was really useful in preparing for the HSK tests, and in super fast tracking my language. And by fast tracking, I'm not going fast at all, but I find that it gets the meaning and the context better, because these are bigger chunks of language than in the course book. They're giving you very small bits, and they're building up slowly. So I personally tend to use the workbook the most, the workbook chapters with the listening and the reading and stuff, and I use the study book. As you can see, I put the workbook, which is in black and white, first, and the study book, which is in color. I put that in the order that I use them the most. So I use the workbook the most to do the exercises over and over and over, and I put the course book in the back more as a reference material, to be honest with you. I'll go through it and I'll pick out things that I need to know, but I generally don't study, for me, I don't study the language and then do the exercises. I learn the language by doing the exercises. Does that make sense? So I find that that really, really personally challenges me and keeps me motivated to keep doing these tasks. Yeah, but I've never been one for explicit grammar instruction anyway, so that's just a personal preference. I'm not sure what grammar, what preference you might have, and if this is a first, second language that you're learning, you might not know yet. So I would try both ways. Try in a new chapter, try using the study book first and then doing the exercises in the workbook, and then a different chapter, try using the workbook first and then using the study book as a reference, and see what works for you. Keep your motivation radar up. Keep asking yourself at the end of every study day, does that motivate me to come back? Am I curious about more? Like, you'll hit like this language wall where you're like, oh, I can't study anymore today. But before you stop, ask yourself, do I want to come back to this tomorrow? If so, you can repeat the methods that you've done before. So tracking your progress. I track mine here, and I track it on the calendar that I think oh no, I didn't show you. That was the previous video. I also have a calendar, and sometimes I'll just make a long-running list. For HSK 3, I needed to do multiple months, so I have definitely moved over to a calendar. It doesn't matter where you keep track of things. It doesn't matter how you keep track of things. Just keep track so you can know what you're doing, how long you're spending, and to give yourself that minute at the end of studying where you really, really ask yourself, is this working for me? Do I want to do this again tomorrow? Vocabulary, vocabulary, vocabulary. I am a huge fan, and I have a million videos about this Sahana, so I'm not going to go into too much detail about this, but I'm a huge fan of the Leitner box. I've been told that I'm Leitner crazy. Again, I have a lot of videos about that, so please feel free to dig into that. It is basically the time-space repetition program that all of the Duolingos and the Memorize and all that stuff, all of that's based off of this program. It's a 64-day time-space repetition program. This is a paper version, clearly, because that is what the original Leitner box system is. And again, you can find digital versions of this in a few different apps. But I actually find that writing it, using Pleco, the dictionary Pleco, to see the order, and writing it myself and writing the different things I need on physical cards and moving those around as I'm practicing them, I find for me that that works really, really a lot better. And I use apps for everything. But it just wasn't working. It just wasn't working for vocabulary. So I strongly, strongly suggest suggest the Leitner box system for vocabulary. I tend to do the vocabulary I start to incorporate new vocabulary from a future chapter about 2 weeks before I'm about to do that chapter in the HSK books. So by the time I get to the workbook, I'm familiar with the vocabulary, and so my cognitive load is lower, so I can actually focus on the nuances of the language and the context of the language within those exercises. So again, I usually start incorporating, getting them into the beginning level of the Leitner box about 2 weeks before I know I'm going to use that chapter. It's a bit tricky timing-wise, some-wise. Like right now, I'm ready to move on to chapter 4 in HSK 3, but I slacked off in my Leitner box, so I'm not ready. So I'm going to have to review the first few chapters of HSK 3 and start doing my chapter 4 HSK 3 flashcards because it doesn't make sense to study a language when you don't know any of the vocabulary at all, or even recognize them. It's too hard. There's too much happening in, especially in HSK 3, where it's all characters, no opinion. So I need the vocabulary first, at least at the recognition level, and then I can do the exercises and learn so much more, because there isn't 500 things that I'm learning at once. All right, so to recap, I really think it's a good idea to spend a month learning about the language, learning about the characters, learning about the radicals, that kind of thing. And Kyle's Sensible Chinese course is a really good way to go. Since you're focused on speaking the language in a work context, I would strongly recommend Fluent Forever, Gabe Weiner's audio pack for Chinese, Mandarin Chinese. The standard course books is really good for the HSK series. And once you get into them, that's all you need the whole way through, honestly. There's so many exercises in these books. I seriously don't use any other. I use the Leitner box and the HSK, the standard course books. That's all I've been using all year. I don't have time for other resources because there's so many different ways I can practice the language within these books. So once you start doing the HSK books, you're looking at 35 kwai per book, approximately 35 kwai per book, and then you've just got to make a plan and keep going with the exercises. The last thing I didn't mention yet is I actually put dates on every time I do an exercise, and I'll come back. Like here you can see I did this the first time on April 30th, and I intentionally did it in a way that I could come back and cover this up, and I did it again on June 7th. So I come back to chapters weeks later, and then I check to see how many I did. Like on April 30th, I got 3 out of 5 right, and on June 7th, I got 4 out of 5 right. And even that 1 point out of 5 feels like I've progressed. And just sometimes I'll put, like I put number 4 is very hard on April 30th, and on June 7th, it was still hard. But sometimes I'll see that. I'll see, okay, this one was really hard. And after I uncover it, I'll see, oh, that one was really hard. On this side, I didn't write anything, which means it was easier. Or sometimes I'll write, wow, that was really easy. And seeing that difference with time is, I find, really motivating. So I can't suggest to you enough to date everything that you do in the workbook or the study book. Even if it's the first time you're looking over a grammar point, put a date on it. Like, document that you went over that on that date, and each time you go back to it, write the date on there. I think you'll see a big difference, because there is such a huge difference between English and Chinese. I think each time you touch a particular task or a particular reading or a particular listening, I think you'll see such a huge difference. And looking at how small that time frame is between when you first did it and when you did the second time and third time, and how much better you can understand it, I think that's very motivating. So that's my final tip to you. Sahana, I hope this has been useful. Please let me know how it goes, and if you have any other questions. I'll put all of the things that I mentioned down in the link below, so you can, in the show notes below, so you can follow that. Go to those resources and do what you need to do. Good luck, and again, let us know how it goes. And I'll share Sahana's updates as she brings them in. And of course, the elephant in the room is you could start a YouTube channel. But most people aren't crazy enough to do this, so I'm not recommending that at all. But it is a way to track your progress. Thank you. Sajian!